Is it possible for a name to define your future, or do we have the power to change our essence before the eyes of the Creator? In the pages of sacred history, few names resonate with such an intense mixture of intrigue, passion, and intertwined destinies as that of Jacob. This biblical patriarch, whose name was eventually changed to Israel, was not just a man of cunning and tenacity, but a direct recipient of divine blessings and the father of the 12 tribes that would form a nation. His life is a mirror of the struggle we all face, the battle between our human weaknesses and the glorious call of God. Jacob was more than a master of strategy, he was the bearer of the promises given to Abraham and Isaac. But the path to that legacy was not paved with flowers, it was marked by exile, deception, and nights of anguish under the desert stars. From the moment he grasped his brother's heel in the womb, to the mysterious night he wrestled with the divine being until dawn, Jacob's journey teaches us that God can transform even the most supplanting heart into a prince of God. Today, here at Bible Says It, we are going to immerse ourselves in the complete story of Jacob. We will explore his shadows, his unconditional loves, and that pivotal moment where his identity was redefined forever. If you want to understand how God works through imperfect people to fulfill perfect purposes, this journey is for you. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and get ready, because we are about to discover how the man who began as a fugitive ended up founding an eternal nation. Let's begin. Is it possible for a name to define your entire future, or do we have the power to change our very essence before the eyes of the Creator? In the grand theater of biblical history, few names resonate with such an intense mixture of intrigue, passion, and intertwined destinies as that of Jacob. This patriarch, whose name was eventually changed by God to Israel, was far more than just a man of cunning and tenacity. He was a chosen recipient of divine blessings and the father of the 12 tribes that would eventually form a nation. His life serves as a profound mirror of the struggle we all face, the eternal battle between our human weaknesses and the glorious, relentless call of God. Jacob was much more than a master of strategy or a supplanter. He was the bearer of the sacred promises given to Abraham and Isaac. However, the path to that legacy was not paved with comfort, it was a journey marked by years of exile, the pain of deception, and long, lonely nights of anguish under the desert stars. From the moment his hand grasped his brother's heel in the womb to that mysterious, life-altering night at Peniel where he wrestled with the divine being until the break of day, Jacob's journey teaches us that God can transform even the most flawed heart into a prince of God. Today, here at Bible Says It, we are going to immerse ourselves in the complete, epic story of Jacob. We will explore his shadows, his unconditional loves, and the pivotal moments where his identity was redefined for eternity. If you want to understand how God works through imperfect people to fulfill perfect purposes, this journey is for you. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and get ready, because we are about to discover how the man who began as a fugitive ended up founding an eternal nation. Let's begin. The narrative of Jacob's life does not begin with a quiet cradle, but with a miracle and a mysterious struggle. Isaac, the son of promise born to Abraham and Sarah in their old age, had married Rebekah, a woman from the land of Aram-Naharaim. However, for 20 years, the couple faced the same shadow of barrenness that had haunted the previous generation. Isaac did not turn to human schemes, instead, he prayed fervently to the Lord on behalf of his wife. The Lord answered his cry, and Rebekah conceived, but this was no ordinary pregnancy. Inside her womb, a violent battle was raging between the twins. The conflict was so intense that Rebekah, deeply distressed, went to consult the Lord about her condition. The divine revelation she received was staggering and defied the social norms of the ancient world. The Lord told her, "2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger." This prophecy established a destiny of preeminence for the younger son before he had even taken his first breath. When the hour of birth finally arrived, the physical contrast between the brothers was immediate and prophetic. The first to emerge was red and covered in hair like a garment. They named him Esau, meaning hairy. Right behind him came his younger brother, his tiny hand firmly grasping Esau's heel as if refusing to be left behind. For this reason, he was named Jacob, which literally means supplanter or one who takes by the heel. As the boys grew into men, their paths diverged sharply. Esau became a rugged man of the field, a skilled and rough hunter who thrived in the wild. Jacob, in contrast, was a quiet man, a home dweller who preferred the order and reflection of life among the tents. This fundamental difference in temperament led to a dangerous rift within the family home. Isaac favored Esau because he enjoyed the taste of the wild game his son brought home, while Rebekah's heart was moved by a special love for Jacob. The stage was set for a confrontation of wills that would eventually birth 2 distinct nations. One day, as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the camp, Jacob was busy preparing a succulent lentil stew. The rich, savory aroma wafted through the air just as his brother Esau returned from the field. However, this was not the triumphant return of a successful hunter. Esau arrived exhausted, faint, and utterly drained of his strength. Catching the scent of the red pottage, Esau felt an overwhelming, primal hunger. He begged Jacob for a portion of the meal, claiming he was at the very point of death from starvation. It was in this moment of physical vulnerability that Jacob's strategic and opportunistic mind went to work. Instead of offering a bowl of food out of simple brotherly kindness, Jacob proposed a trade that would alter the history of their family forever. "Sell me this day thy birthright." To the modern ear, this might sound like a minor transaction, but in the patriarchal world, the birthright, or primogeniture, was the most sacred and valuable possession a son could hold. It meant being the principal heir of the father's estate, receiving a double portion of the entire inheritance, and, perhaps most significantly, holding spiritual preeminence and leadership over all other siblings. It was the legal right to become the next patriarch of the divine covenant. Yet Esau, dominated by his immediate physical impulses and sensory needs, displayed a startling disregard for his eternal inheritance. "Behold, I am at the point to die," he reasoned carelessly, "and what profit shall this birthright do to me?" Jacob, ever the supplanter, pressed for a formal oath to seal the bargain. Without a second thought, Esau swore the oath, selling his sacred destiny for a single meal of bread and lentils. The scripture records this moment with a chilling finality. Esau ate, drank, rose up, and went his way, thus despising his birthright. While Jacob's tactics were cunning and lacked ethical grace, the outcome aligned with the divine destiny announced before their birth. Jacob had secured the promise, while Esau had proven that he valued the temporary over the eternal. Time eventually took its toll on the patriarch Isaac, whose eyes grew so dim that he lost his sight almost entirely, a physical darkness that set the stage for one of the most tense dramas in the biblical narrative. Feeling that his end was near, Isaac decided to formally pass on the patriarchal blessing and the sacred promises of the divine covenant to his favorite son, Esau. However, the destiny of a nation would not be decided in the open light of day, but in the shadows of a tent and under the weight of a deception orchestrated by the twins' own mother. Rebekah, having overheard Isaac's plans, acted swiftly to ensure that Jacob would be the one to receive the preeminence, fulfilling the revelation she had received years before. With calculated precision, she prepared a savory stew exactly as Isaac loved it and dressed Jacob in Esau's finest garments to carry the scent of the wild fields. But the most daring detail was covering Jacob's smooth hands and the back of his neck with the skins of young goats, perfectly mimicking the rough, hairy texture of his older brother. When Jacob entered the tent, the atmosphere was thick with the possibility of discovery. Isaac, though unable to see, remained alert with his other senses. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau, the old man murmured, his suspicion lingering even as he felt the coarse skins. Jacob stood his ground, maintaining the lie that he was indeed Esau. Ultimately, it was the familiar aroma of the fields on the clothing that convinced Isaac. He pulled his son close and released the irrevocable words of the blessing. He invoked the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and most crucially, lordship over his brothers and all nations. The tragedy unfolded the moment Jacob left his father's side. The real Esau returned from his hunt, only to discover with horror that his blessing had been stolen. Esau's reaction was a great and exceeding bitter cry that pierced the silence of the camp as he begged his father for even a single blessing for himself. Isaac, though trembling with the realization of the trickery, confessed that the word had been spoken and could not be taken back. Jacob was now the blessed one. This act of supplantation ignited a murderous fire in Esau's heart, as he vowed to kill his brother once the days of mourning for their father were over. What began as a desperate grab for a spiritual legacy ended with a family shattered and a son forced to flee for his life into the unknown. Betrayal often carries an immediate and heavy price, and for Jacob, that price was total exile. When Rebekah learned that Esau was actively plotting to murder his brother as soon as Isaac passed away, she was seized by a mother's desperate anguish. To save her favorite son's life, she advised him to flee far away to Haran, to the house of her brother Laban. "Stay with him a few days," she urged, "until your brother's fury subsides, a hope for a quick reunion that, tragically, she would never live to see." Before his departure, Isaac called Jacob to his side once more. Remarkably, instead of issuing a stern rebuke for the deception, the aging patriarch formally confirmed the blessing upon him. He gave Jacob a crucial command for the preservation of their sacred lineage. He was strictly forbidden from taking a wife from among the Canaanite women of the land. Instead, he was to seek a companion from within his own kindred, in the house of Bethuel. Isaac then invoked the blessing of Abraham over him, praying that God would make him fruitful and multiply him into a great congregation of nations. With these words ringing in his ears, Jacob set out from Beersheba toward the unknown. He left behind the security of his father's tents and the protective love of his mother to face a journey of hundreds of miles through harsh, desert territories. The man who once preferred the comfort of the home was now entirely alone, traversing a dangerous wilderness with nothing but a staff in his hand. This journey was not merely a change of location, but the beginning of a profound spiritual transformation. In the vast, echoing silence of the desert, Jacob was forced to confront his own actions and the uncertainty of a future built on a promise he was only just beginning to understand. In the absolute solitude of his trek, Jacob reached a place called Luz as the sun began to set. Without the shelter of his father's house and with no company but the stars, he took a stone from the rugged landscape to use as a pillow and laid down to sleep under the open sky. What Jacob did not realize was that this ordinary patch of earth was about to become the very threshold of the celestial courts. That night, the fugitive experienced a vision that would fundamentally reshape his understanding of the divine. He saw a massive ladder reaching from earth to heaven, with the angels of God ascending and descending upon it. From the top of this mystical structure, the voice of the Lord broke through the silence of Jacob's soul. God did not appear to condemn him for his past deceits or his fractured family history. Instead, he stepped forward to claim him as the legitimate heir of the covenant. The Lord reiterated the promises of land and a countless lineage that had been given to Abraham and Isaac. But for the lonely traveler, God added a vital, personal promise: I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest. In that moment, the God of his ancestors became Jacob's personal protector. When Jacob awoke, he was overcome with reverential fear. He realized that the place he had stumbled upon was not just a resting spot, but the house of God and the gate of heaven. Moved by the majesty of the encounter, he took the stone he had used for a pillow and set it up as a memorial pillar, pouring oil on it to consecrate it. He renamed the place Bethel, meaning house of God. Strengthened by this encounter, Jacob continued his journey through the Syrian steppes, no longer a man running from his past, but a man walking toward a divinely ordained future. After his arduous journey of hundreds of kilometers across the Syrian steppes, Jacob finally reached the land of Haran, where his uncle Laban resided. His arrival was marked by a providential encounter at a local well. There, he met shepherds waiting to water their flocks and learned that Laban's daughter, Rachel, was approaching with her father's sheep. When the beautiful Rachel arrived, Jacob performed a feat of great strength, single-handedly rolling away the massive stone that covered the mouth of the well to water her flock. Overwhelmed by the emotion of finding his kin, Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud, revealing that he was the son of her aunt Rebekah. Laban welcomed his nephew with great joy, embracing him and inviting him into his home, declaring, "Surely thou art my bone and my flesh." However, Jacob's stay would soon transition from that of a guest to a laborer. Having fallen deeply in love with Rachel's beauty, Jacob made a bold proposal to Laban. He would serve his uncle for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. The Bible records a touching testament to his devotion, stating that those 7 years seemed to him like but a few days because of the intense love he had for her. Yet, in the land of Haran, the supplanter met his match in Laban, a master of deception. When the 7 years were complete and the wedding feast was held, Laban orchestrated a cruel switch under the cover of darkness. Instead of Rachel, he brought his elder daughter, Leah, to the bridal tent. It was only in the morning light that Jacob realized he had been tricked. When he confronted his uncle, Laban coolly justified the act by claiming it was not the custom of their land to give the younger daughter before the firstborn. To finally marry the woman he loved, Jacob was forced to agree to another 7 years of hard labor. This double marriage laid the foundation for a household that would be defined by jealousy, rivalry, and deep emotional complexity. Jacob's household in Haran became a landscape of domestic conflict, as Leah and Rachel vied desperately for their husband's favor. Because Leah felt unloved and despised, the Lord looked upon her with compassion and opened her womb. In rapid succession, she gave birth to 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, seeing her sister's fertility while she remained barren, was consumed by envy. In her desperation to provide heirs, she gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife. From this union, Dan and Naphtali were born. Leah, fearing she had stopped conceiving, followed suit by giving her servant Zilpah to Jacob, who bore Gad and Asher. The rivalry continued as Leah eventually bore 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun. Finally, the scripture tells us that God remembered Rachel, and she gave birth to Joseph, and much later, her final son, Benjamin. These 12 sons would eventually become the foundational patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, each carrying a unique destiny and legacy. During these years of family growth, Jacob also sought to build his own wealth. Although Laban had frequently changed his wages, Jacob used his expertise as a shepherd and divine insights to ensure that the strongest and most numerous animals in the flocks became his own. His prosperity grew so immense that he accumulated great riches in livestock, servants, and camels. However, this success bred deep resentment. Laban and his sons began to look at Jacob with evil eyes, accusing him of stripping their father of his wealth. After 20 years of labor and deception in Haran, Jacob realized that the environment had turned hostile, and the time had come to gather his large family and return to the land of his fathers. After serving his uncle Laban for 20 long years in the land of Haran, Jacob made the definitive decision to return to the land of Canaan. He set out with his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, his 12 sons, his servants, and the immense wealth and livestock he had accumulated through divine favor. However, this return was more than a simple journey, it was a high-stakes confrontation with his own past. The thought of meeting his brother Esau, whom he had not seen since the day of the great deception, filled him with a cold, paralyzing dread. Jacob feared that Esau's murderous rage had not been extinguished by the decades. To test the waters, Jacob sent messengers ahead with generous gifts, hoping to soften his brother's heart. But the news they brought back was terrifying. Esau was marching toward them with 400 armed men. In a state of panic, Jacob divided his caravan into 2 camps, reasoning that if one were attacked, the other might escape. He then poured out his heart in a humble prayer, admitting his unworthiness and begging for protection from the hand of his brother. That night, after sending his family across the river, Jacob was left entirely alone. In the darkness, a mysterious man appeared and wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. During this supernatural struggle, the being touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, putting his joint out of place. Yet, despite the agonizing pain, Jacob refused to let go, famously crying out, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." In that moment of absolute surrender and desperate tenacity, his identity was transformed forever. The being declared, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." The next morning, limping but spiritually reborn, Israel looked up to see Esau and his 400 men approaching. To his utter astonishment, the encounter was not one of bloodshed, but of tears and reconciliation. Esau ran to meet him, fell on his neck, and kissed him. Overwhelmed by the grace he had received, Jacob exclaimed, "I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God." With the past finally healed, the caravan of Israel crossed into the Promised Land to begin its new chapter as the chosen nation. After serving his uncle Laban for 20 long years in the land of Haran, Jacob made the definitive decision to return to the land of Canaan. He set out with his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, his 12 sons, his servants, and the immense wealth and livestock he had accumulated through divine favor. However, this return was more than a simple journey, it was a high-stakes confrontation with his own past. The thought of meeting his brother Esau, whom he had not seen since the day of the great deception, filled him with a cold, paralyzing dread. Jacob feared that Esau's murderous rage had not been extinguished by the decades. To test the waters, Jacob sent messengers ahead with generous gifts, hoping to soften his brother's heart. But the news they brought back was terrifying. Esau was marching toward them with 400 armed men. In a state of panic, Jacob divided his caravan into 2 camps, reasoning that if one were attacked, the other might escape. He then poured out his heart in a humble prayer, admitting his unworthiness and begging for protection from the hand of his brother. That night, after sending his family across the river, Jacob was left entirely alone. In the darkness, a mysterious man appeared and wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. During this supernatural struggle, the being touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, putting his joint out of place. Yet, despite the agonizing pain, Jacob refused to let go, famously crying out, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." In that moment of absolute surrender and desperate tenacity, his identity was transformed forever. The being declared, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." The next morning, limping but spiritually reborn, Israel looked up to see Esau and his 400 men approaching. To his utter astonishment, the encounter was not one of bloodshed, but of tears and reconciliation. Esau ran to meet him, fell on his neck, and kissed him. Overwhelmed by the grace he had received, Jacob exclaimed, "I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God." With the past finally healed, the caravan of Israel crossed into the Promised Land to begin its new chapter as the chosen nation.